First off, thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in to the Public Works Podcast. It means a lot. I'm here just trying to help everybody tell their story in the space. Also, I am looking for more interviewees. So if you are that person, or if you know somebody who needs to tell their story just so a youngster can hear it and be attracted to the industry, please reach out to me. Click the link below and we'll get you set up for an interview. Again, if you want to be on the Public Works Podcast, or if you know somebody that needs to be on the Public Works Podcast, tag them in the comments below. Last but not least, if you're trying to figure out what Vitendo Training Solution is, I'll explain it to you in the most simplified way. If you've ever been on YouTube and watched a video on how to operate a piece of equipment that you own, or how to fix a piece of equipment that you own, that is what we come out and do for your city or for your department. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Looking forward to talking to you soon. Now enjoy the show. Thank you. Welcome. This is the Public Works Podcast. My name is Joseph Blackman. Today, got a real treat for you. Her name is Sheila Joy, and she is the executive director at NASSCO, Inc. Sheila, say what's up to everybody.
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me here today this morning.
Sure. So NASSCO, let's talk about NASSCO, then we'll get into the origin story of Sheila. So NASSCO, explain to us just share a little bit about it.
Sure. NASSCO is a 501c6 trade association. We are located near Washington, D.C. in the Frederick, Maryland area. We have been around since 1976, and our primary mission is really to set standards for assessment, maintenance, and rehabilitation of underground infrastructure. So it's a pretty simple message, but it really encompasses an awful lot because there's a ton of work that we do. But we are really designed to be an objective voice for the entire industry. So that would be the municipalities who own systems, public agencies, the contractors who do the work, the suppliers and manufacturers of equipment and materials, and then also the consulting engineers who would be involved in evaluating assets and helping to come up with good recommendations for rehabilitation. So we really mirror the entire industry, and we serve as their voice in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. That's what we do in a nutshell. Yeah.
Totally. And you're right. I'm a part of the association, and that rings true to all the content you're putting out, what this says on the website. Because sometimes you'll join these associations, like, what do you guys actually do? What actually happens? And I love how NASSCO, you actually do what you said you guys do.
We do, but it's all because of members like you, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Our committees are extremely robust. We have technical committees that develop specification guidelines. We have educational programs. And while some of that is staff-driven and consultant-driven, paid consultant-driven, most of it really comes out of people like you and our other members who join the committees and do the work and show up and really produce great materials for the entire industry to benefit from. So that's where it comes from.
Sure. And I love how you guys, NASSCO, we're taking on the kind of the industry standards of certain things, the manhole inspections, the sewer inspections. Can you go a little bit into why standards are created and why there needs to be industry standards?
So that the work gets done properly. Maintaining assets is extremely expensive. And so I think the real key, and a lot of people aren't familiar, most people are, but some aren't. So I'm going to just share a little bit of basic information. But the cornerstone of NASSCO is really our Pipeline Assessment Certification Program, or PACP for short. And it is a training program where individuals can come and learn how to assess a condition within a sewer, a lateral, or a manhole, and then report that back. And it's just a common language that is used. It's almost like a unique language. And then the findings from that really help system owners determine where their highest risk is so that they can go in and then appropriately allocate funds and time and resources. So the standards are critical, because if the work's not done right, the money is not being spent wisely, and constituents in our environment are not being served properly. So it's really critical to know what your assets are, to know what condition they're in, to understand what needs to be addressed first, because obviously, and this is stated a lot in our industry, but it's really true, we are out of sight and out of mind. When funding comes in for infrastructure, it goes to the pretty things, the bridges, the railroads, the airports, this. But if what's underneath all of that crumbles, it's a real problem. So we do set those standards to maintain the underground so that the rest of the infrastructure can really be efficiently used.
Sure. And I've been on the field with guys, and there's each different city has a different way they do things. But I love how with NASSCO, the PACP, you're objectively systemizing what a cleaning pipe should be like. So it gets everybody on the same page and go, oh, this is what it should look like. This is how it should be done. Here's how it should end up, which I appreciate because again, you go from one city to the next and they do it differently. And now they can all be on the same page. But speaking of municipalities, should public agencies consider joining NASSCO? And then what would they get out of it? How would it benefit them?
Oh, that's a great question. It's interesting. In 1976, NASSCO was formed as a contractor organization, and it still is. We have 36% of our members are the contractors who do the work, but that is a small number compared to everyone else. It's 36%. So public agencies, our percentage of members who are public agencies or system owners is currently about 20%. And so we have some that are extremely involved in NASSCO, and I can share some of those benefits in a minute. We do, as I mentioned earlier, we do mirror the entire industry. And so while we have 36% contractors, 20% public agencies, we have about another 20% of the consulting engineers. And then we have a smaller percentage of the suppliers and manufacturers that make up our entire membership base. So the benefits to diving into that little piece of the pie that are the 20% public agency, one of the great benefits, going back to our PACP program that I mentioned earlier, is that all NASSCO members get discounts on training for their field workers or themselves or their engineers, whomever, for our PACP program, but also for any training program within NASSCO. In addition to PACP, we also have that's a prerequisite for a lateral and manhole assessment program. And that kind of gets back to your question about why the standards for all three. The reason the standards for all three is because they're holistic. You need to have your underground pipes, your laterals, your manholes, everything works together. So the PACP program really covers that. But we also have inspector training certification. Those programs are for two technologies currently, CIPP and manhole rehab. So a public agency that is a member of NASSCO can get discounts on those training programs. And we have a number of other ones in the pike right now that we're going to be introducing soon. So that's one huge benefit. And that's on the education side. In terms of just having a voice in the specifications that we develop. So if we're developing a specification about a particular technology, by being part of our committees, the public agencies can contribute what they have witnessed, what they have seen, what they experience, their concerns, their frustrations. And by having everyone participate in the development of these specs, we know we get to the best possible product. So they're a critical part of our development of the specifications. Plus, they get to learn an extensive amount from our industry about the technologies available. And so that really helps. And that gives them the knowledge that they need to make sure they're spending their money the most wisely. And then I guess I would just wrap all this up with advocacy. We spend a lot of time in Washington, D.C. We assist our members in helping to get funding to rehabilitate their underground infrastructure. And so we just came back from Washington, D.C. in March. We had a couple of public agencies join us. I actually have a video of one of them that shared everything and the benefits that they got out of that. It's exciting to see our public agency membership base really grow because they're contributing an awful lot to what we do and they're benefiting as well. So it's a great partnership.
Sure. And one thing you talked about was training, which is my passion, like the whole workforce development side. So I guess since you're on the end of the association, and I'm sure you have a lot more conversations around this than I do, but is it hard finding qualified workers for public agencies?
Oh.
And then if so, what's NASSCO doing just to help that and ease that pain for them?
It's interesting you should ask. Yes, it is a major issue. It's just, especially I think after the pandemic, people work differently. Everybody's just a little confused, I think. I do see some normalization coming, but I just think the way that people are hired, the way they're employed is very different than it used to be. So it is a very big problem for contractors, for municipalities, for anyone, frankly, for NASSCO. We've had difficulty hiring as well. But when it comes to field workers, for example, we have our workforce development committee, very robust committee, relatively new. And we went in there with the intention of what can we do to help public agencies, contractors get the right people on their teams. And so we started off looking at curriculum for all the different trenchless technologies, curriculum for, we have information for proper grouting, for CIP installation, for slip lining, for all of the different types of technologies. And we started that down that path. But then we took a step back and we said, why don't we ask the field workers what they need, why they are leaving, why they won't stay. So we did a survey. We had a good response rate. We had about 800 field workers respond to our survey. It was pretty detailed. So the fact that they took the time was fantastic. And we broke it out into a couple of different ways. We started by asking them what attracts them to a job, why they would leave a job. And that we were expecting the typical, I don't make enough money, especially field workers. I travel too much. For contractors, I travel too much and I don't want to leave my family, benefits, all those things we thought we were going to hear. What we heard was we're not led well. We don't have the companies or the organizations don't have the proper culture that we need to really guide us and to help us grow. And so NASSCO has taken a little bit of a left turn to develop some leadership training programs and to better understand that, because you can bring all the people in the world in, but if you don't know how to manage them, if you don't know how to treat them properly, they're not as concerned about the money and the travel as we thought they were. And so the Workforce Development Committee is now really beginning to dive into that a little bit more deeply and understand how we as an industry can become better leaders, because that's what it's going to take to keep people and to nurture them.
Sure, that's huge. I love that. So let's talk a little bit about Sheila. So what got you in the industry, and then how'd you, I wouldn't say end up, but how did you become the executive director of NASSCO? It's huge.
Oh, I call it a God thing. I feel like I've been prepared my whole life for this particular role because I love what I do immensely. I care very deeply about our members, and the preparation for me that I see through my lifetime, I started out in marketing. So I got my degree in California, marketing communications, and I had my own agency for many years. So I did web development, strategy, public relations, the whole ball of wax. One of my clients was a company called Applied Felts. It was my very first company, or one of my very first clients on my own when I started my own. And they manufacture felt liners for CIPP. From there, it just snowballed. I started working with Duke's Root Control. I worked with a number of compliance and virus systems, VisuSewer, a number of different contractors, and it just started snowballing. And all of my clients for my company were in this space. And so I worked with different technologies, different types of contractors, ProPipe out in California. And so the roster was pretty impressive, quite frankly. That gave me a deep understanding of the industry, who we are, what we do, what's possible for our industry. Then I took a little side turn. I have a child who had a brain injury. So when he was 18, I had to rethink my life over again. And he was disabled from that. He's doing fine now, but it was a major turning point in my life. And so I decided to try to give back a little bit. So in 2012, I went to work with a nonprofit, an organization called Jill's House, and they provide respite to children or families raising children with disabilities, because you are exhausted raising a child with a disability. You need time. So this organization takes on a child for a weekend, shows them a wonderful time, and then the parent gets respite. So through my job there, I just worked there a couple of years, I gained also a deep knowledge of how to run a nonprofit organization. I was their director of advancement. And then my life got back. My son was doing well. I got back on track. I came back into the industry. And then I got a call one day. I started working with NASSCO. In fact, I started writing articles for NASSCO. That they were one of my clients. So I wrote a lot of technical documents and things like that. And then I got a call from the board saying, Sheila, would you consider applying for this open executive committee or executive director position? And I thought about it a minute. I thought, I don't know if I'm qualified, but then I went back through my life and God's planning. And I felt, you know what, I'm being planted right where I'm supposed to be at this particular time. And so I started in 2018. I've been here 5 years now, and it has been the most rewarding and truly perfect job for me. I have enjoyed it
Yeah.
so much.
Love it.
That's
Love
kind
it.
of a
So
long
let's
answer, but I hope it
no,
tells the
no, that's
picture.
fine. And the reason why I like long answers is because there might be somebody out there, they're not directly in that same position, but they're like, I've got this going on in life and I got that going on in life. And how can I start to find my way? And it's interesting that everybody has their own way, but it helps other people when they hear it go, oh, I can actually find my way. But in regards to like mentoring coaching, let's say you had to mentor somebody to be the NASSCO executive director, what skill set should they pick up to be great at what you do?
Conflict resolution is key. You need
Conflict
to,
resolution?
absolutely. In this position, there are many different points of view, different needs, you need to be able to identify when someone is being self-serving. And because the thing about NASSCO is every competitors come together and they work together to develop a specification, for example, that will benefit everyone. They know, if you're a member of NASSCO, you know pretty quickly that if you're in it for your own benefit, you're probably not going to mesh very well because everyone else is in it to lift the tide. We're
Yeah.
in it to come together. Sometimes there will be differing views and differing opinions, but you need to be objective, balanced. You need to listen to everybody. You need to really understand all different perspectives. And then you need to work to come up with a resolution that is fair and equitable. And sometimes people won't like that, but you need to be. So, in terms of the other qualification, would be just strong enough to stand on truth and stand on what's right and not waver from that. So, those would be two qualifications that you probably weren't expecting, but skilled at
No.
conflict resolution and just having an inner strength to stand firm on what you know is correct. In terms of other skills, we are now embarking, our training programs are exploding. One of the things I am looking for right now is who is going to replace me. I won't be in this job forever. And so I've always got my eye open on members and employees and just random people. Like, would they be a good executive director? Because I want to leave this organization in really good hands. So I think having an understanding of training is also, quite frankly, now that we're moving into this new world, I think is something that is going to be important in terms of what's on a resume. Clearly, an understanding of the technologies that we represent, clearly, an understanding of how funding works, how public agencies operate. So, there's a lot of technical stuff that needs to be underneath there, but also from just who you are, you need to be able to manage all that well and not take anything
Sure.
personally.
Yeah,
I hear things said about me and I just walk on by. You need
good
to
for
not.
you.
Yeah. So,
Good for you. Good for you. So, speaking of coming into the new frontier, a lot of technical things that are out there now. Let's talk about styrene safety in the CIP process. So that it's got its little headlines coming about. Can you talk about what NASSCO's position is and what we're doing about it?
sure. Our position is let's learn as much as we possibly can so that we can keep our workers and communities safe. That's just the bottom line. But it's really interesting. I'm not sure when your podcast will air, but right now it is February 28th. And yesterday, in fact, we had Trenches Technology Magazine had a webinar that attracted like 1,200 people on the topic. But it was really a good webinar because the panelists were not necessarily industry people. We had a couple. We had Dennis Piven, who actually represents NASSCO. He is our health, safety, and environmental consultant. He's fantastic. Just started working with us early April. Dr. John Matthews from the Trenchless Technology Center at Louisiana Tech. He's been involved in some of the CIP studies that have been done over the past 5 years or so. And then Dr. Mark Knight from Waterloo. And he has done studies on CIP and styrene, but he's focused a little bit more on the lateral part of it. So we did have the industry CIP people, but we also had the styrene industry and health and safety professionals as well. So we had someone from CERC, and CERC is the Styrene Information Research Center. And it was Mr. Ray Ehrlich. And what we learned from him yesterday was the amount of research that has been done on styrene for 50 plus years. So it's been out there more than the 5 or 10 years we've been talking about it. The research has been extensive. In fact, CERT has spent on its own 25 million since I think 1987. So that was interesting to hear that perspective. And then we had someone from NIOSH, and NIOSH, I have to look at my notes because I can never remember what that stands for. It's the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. Their parent company is the CDC. So Drew Burns was on the call, and he shared a little bit about what they're doing. And then we had Mr. John, oh boy, I'm losing it, sorry. John Ehrlich. No, I'm getting my names mixed up. John Schweitzer, pardon me. And he is from ACMA, the American Composites Manufacturers Association. So I will just tell you what it all boiled down to for me. It was so interesting, was the research has been going on for 50 plus years. Those three gentlemen I just mentioned at the end were the ones who shared all of that and where it's going. And all of that information is available on their websites. And then we had the three panelists from the CIP side who really talked about what's been happening in the industry. But I think the most valuable thing that came out of that, honestly, Joseph, is that there are, and this came from Dr. John Matthews, but there are specific recommendations for contractors and public agencies to follow in the safe use and handling of styrene. There is an updated specification on the NASSCO website. Everyone should download it and read it. TTC has recommended, these are specific recommendations. For example, and I don't know, hopefully your audience knows what CIP is, but if not, it's the cured in place process, cured in place pipe. So it's basically typically a felt tube that is impregnated with some kind of resin, sometimes styrene. It is inserted from manhole, let's say to manhole. It is pulled or pushed or expanded to fit against the existing pipe, and then it's cured with heat, with steam, with UV light. So this particular topic focused on the steam part of it. So there is a stack that comes out of the output end, and the steam is released from that stack. So I just share all that because one of the very important recommendations is use a vertical stack that goes up at least 6 feet into the air. If you don't, you're going to have it dispersed sidewise. So that is one very specific recommendation. The other is, and Dr. Matthews shared, they think about 10 feet around a perimeter of 10 feet around the manhole at the end is appropriate, but to be conservative, make it 15 feet. So I just share this because I think between understanding all of the research that has been done, understanding what Dr. Matthews in particular has recommended to keep our workers safe, now it's up to us to communicate that, to get it out, to push it out, to make sure people are understanding. And we did put it into a little one-pager on the NASSCO website. So NASSCO's safety page has an individual page specific to styrene. So I would just close it by saying, that's a great resource. And I would go there if I was a public agency, contractor, anyone interested in the topic, go there and learn as much as you can and follow the recommendations.
Yeah, no, that's huge. Getting the word out because these things happen. And I'm sure if you're not really searching for it thoroughly, like you won't find it. But if NASSCO's putting it out there, then that's perfect. Just wait for NASSCO to put it out.
And Joseph, the research, especially Josh and CERC, those research programs, I believe that to get into a conversation about it, as Mr. Ehrlich shared yesterday, it's a pretty deep topic. It would require a separate discussion, but their information is public. Go and check it out and educate yourself. Don't trust the headlines. Go and make sure you know what's happening.
Sure. What would be one thing that would surprise people about NASSCO, especially on the public agency side? What's something that people go, oh, wow, I didn't know NASSCO did that, or I didn't know you guys were about that?
I covered most of it earlier in terms of education. So PACP has been around for 20 years, about just before the pandemic or maybe in the middle of it. It was crazy time, but we got a new learning management system so that we can train virtually pretty much anywhere. We have specific territories for some of our programs. Anyone can be trained in PACP very easily from their home computer. So we now have that learning management system for virtual training in place. So the PACP program that's been around, and by the way, we are going to have a new version of that at the end of this year. And I think it's important for public agencies to know that we will be sunsetting PACP version 6. We're trying to get that message out to public agencies and contractors as much as possible. But PACP version 8 will be here at the end of this year. So that's important. But what's surprising, I think, is the depth of the training programs that NASSCO will soon be revealing. For example, now that we have the technology, this past year we created an exam to train any individuals involved in grouting, the chemical grouting, to really understand the safe operating practices. And we have an exam to help them to really help them understand what they need to do. And if they complete the exam properly, they get a recognition of understanding. But we're also diving into more of the, I would say, plumber side of things. So we're in the process right now there's a lot of concerns about when you buy a residential property. People think let's inspect the roof and the electric and the plumbing, but they don't really inspect the lateral. It's not
Yeah.
incorporate that. Yeah. And that can be a real problem down the road. So we're beginning to develop residential inspector training for laterals, but it's really more for the plumbers to have a checklist of what they need to do. And then we're going to be communicating that to the public agencies. These are the things that need to happen when a residential property is sold, or a public, so it could be a business, but whatever, like a private property, to help the plumbers understand, but then to help the cities put a program in place to make sure that, again, they are a huge part of the whole holistic program. And since many laterals are owned by the property owner, if they're not taking care of that, it can really impact the entire system. So that's, I think, a surprise. We're also developing a drain cleaning certification program. We're developing a jetter cleaning certification program. In probably a year or so, we'll be looking at the large diameter cleaning certification program. So we're expanding our education way beyond PACP, and it's super exciting to us because and now that we can get it out virtually, that's the way to really lift those standards up.
Sure, that's huge. Let's say NASSCO's commissioned, or let's say you get a 30-second slot during the next Super Bowl to advertise NASSCO. What global message would you want to get across to the world about NASSCO?
But one thing, NASSCO stands for the National Association of Sewer Service Companies. And it's a pretty descriptive word or group of words, so it makes sense. But I think what I'd like to get across is that we're not just national. So in fact, I'm leaving on Monday to go to Colombia to present PACP to some municipalities down there. Thankfully, they'll be translating for me. But we have a partner in South America. They just changed their name. It's the Latin American Society of Trenchless Technology. And they are really growing the program in Chile and Colombia. And we're looking now at a Portuguese version of the PACP program. And also in Canada, we have an established group in Canada that trains PACP. And we also have a program for French Canadian speaking trainers and personnel. So we're not just national anymore. That's what I would like to get across. We are developing, WRC is the organization in the United Kingdom to whom we have been paying licensing for the PACP codes. We are now autonomous. We now have an agreement where that is now our IP, but we are developing our relationship with WRC so that we can look at global opportunities. So the national part is the part that I think I would like to communicate. We are international, and we are becoming more and more international every day. The other part is the sewer part of it. National Association of Sewer Service Companies. Sewers are clearly the main focus of what we do. We're also getting involved in stormwater, in potable water. There are other areas that are becoming more prevalent, and our members are bringing to us the need to really look at different type of systems. So that is the message I would like to get across. And then just to recap it we serve the entire industry. Based on our membership composition, we're a reflection. If you were able to blow that out, it would probably look like the entire industry. And so we are the voice for underground infrastructure. And we're just always looking for more involvement so that we can be better together.
Sure.
I'd probably find a faster way to say that, but for the ad. But that would be the creative brief. I would come up with something.
No, I'm sure your marketing break could cut it down to 30 seconds and make it
Yeah,
go perfect.
right.
But Sheila, thanks for hopping on the podcast. Thanks for sharing your wealth of information and knowledge with us all. To all the listeners out there, make sure you share this with the public agency. Share it with somebody who's in the sewer industry, and you could tell that they might need a little bit of a coaching, direction, then collaboration. That's one of the main reasons why I join associations, is to get around other people who want to add value, want to give back, want to be able to learn, want to be able to teach and mentor. So that's huge. Sheila, before we get out of here, any final words from you?
My final word is thank you. 2 words, thank
Sure.
you. I really appreciate the way that you have jumped into NASSCO and you become a very involved member, sitting on many committees. And just for your audience, we actually featured Joseph in our recent Pipeline magazine. He was a featured member, so it was nice to learn more about him. But I really wish you all the best in everything that you do. And thank you for the support of me, of NASSCO, but more importantly, our industry and communities. I think you're doing a great job. Thank you, Joe.
Sure. Thank you. Sheila, it's been fun having you on. To all the listeners, make sure you share this with somebody who you think needs to hear it. This has been the Public Works Podcast, and thank you for tuning in.